Yeah. Okay, and how to share? The trainer wants to share his presentation. 4 बजेगा. अच्छा, ये trainer wants to share his presentation. राइट हैंड साइड पे, हाँ लेफ्ट हैंड साइड पे स्क्रीन शेयर, या उसमें वो प्रेस किया तो अच्छा वेबिनार पीपीटी is there.
It's a folder actually.
Okay, that is a folder.
We need to start the presentation. Let's.
एक सेकंड देखते हैं. अभी तो ट्राई किया तो चलेगा ना. This one. Share. Okay. Can you see the presentation? कैमरा दिख रहा है. शेयर किया मैंने पीपीटी. अभी क्लिक किया. आया ना. ठीक है. स्टॉप शेयरिंग किया तो वापस ऐसे आ जाएगा. ठीक है. Will you sharing ppt throughout, right?
Yeah.
दो व्यूअर्स है. दो व्यूअर्स कौन है इसमें? एक. अच्छा ऐसा है. लोग आने चाहिए सर. रजिस्ट्रेशन हमारे पास है. रियल टाइम पे कुछ आएंगे क्या? रियल टाइम कुछ हो सकता है. अच्छा ठीक है. कॉल बैक करूँ क्या? ओके सर.
So we can do just like PowerPoint. So wait, I thought do we have to promote the course also in this? Or?
We can.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I have around 25 slides.
Okay.
I was thinking at the end maybe
Questions.
और स्क्रीनशॉट आपको
कर सकते हैं.
हाँ अभी भी करना है तो कर सकते हैं.
We can even orally भी आप पूछ सकते हैं. आप just make a few calls. लोगों को. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Testing? Going on.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello, Raja. Yeah, hi. This is Sagar from Anybrain School. Yeah, the webinar will start in some time, in 5 minutes. You are the link, right? Yeah. Yeah. Please do. No, just go and visit the link. Maybe in 5 to 10 minutes. Give me a call in case any problem is there. Right? Hello, Vikram. Yeah, hi, Sagar here from Annie School. We had talked in the morning. Yeah. So the webinar will start in 5 minutes. Okay. You can try. You can at least open a window in another tab. Yeah. Okay, fine. Just try out.
Last time, how many users here? Last time when you did the webinar?
20-25 are there. Hello, Aditya. Aditya, this is Sagar here from Annie School. We talked in the morning regarding the webinar. Yeah, webinar will start in 5 minutes. Okay, you can try if possible. हाँ ओके ऑफिस आवर्स से लोगों के
मुझे वही लगा कि थोड़ा या तो वीकेंड को इसके लिए आई वाज थिंकिंग सैटरडे वुड हैव बीन बेटर ये थोड़ा होली वीक है इसके लिए थोड़ा होली का वीक है ना छुट्टी पे चले जाते
कुछ है लोग दिख रहे हैं कुछ ऐसे even they have promoted from their end as well अभी अपना promotion किया 5 लोग कौन है भाई आप में 2 लोग तो हैं 3 लोग कौन आए अच्छी बात है hello yeah hi oh is it okay I'm sorry ठीक है क्या करना भी हाँ 4 बजे का टाइम रहता है लाइव चैट क्या अच्छा मैं वही देख रहा हूँ सबको कॉल कर रहा हूँ if you are in office actually so आपके एंड पे कुछ कोई मतलब ओके उस साइड बैठता हूँ able to hear everything all calls
It's start in 6 minutes.
Yeah. 4 o'clock और live chat चल पड़ेगा. I don't know what live chat is talking about.
Hello. Yeah, you're watching it? Fine, that's good. Yes. Yeah, yeah. Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. Welcome there. अच्छा
Presentation was the camera.
Look, you want to ask that presentation दिखना चाहिए कि आप
Presentation दिखना चाहिए.
presentation ये है presentation दिखेगा हमारा directly चलेगा ना
दिख रहा है क्या?
so दिख रहा है अभी ओके ओके कब स्टार्ट करते हैं ऑटोमेटिक स्टार्ट होती है ओके 5 मिनट्स अभी 5 मिनट्स स्टार्ट होगा कैसे दिखता है हमें दिखता
उनको दिख रहा है.
हाँ ये उनको दिखता है Just wanted to know कि viewers दिखते हैं ना एक जन तो बोल रहा है 2 लोग तो ऑलरेडी हैं Let's see.
Should I mute it? Good evening. Hi, I am Aniket Jain, and I'll be talking about physics in games. A bit about myself. I'm a double degree holder from Swinburne University of Technology, Melbourne. I did a double degree in I did a double degree of Bachelor of Multimedia Games and Interactivity and Bachelor of Science, Computer Science and Software Engineering. I'm also the founder and managing director of Samyak Interactive. Here we develop games for any platform, including we specialize in mobile gaming. We have recently released a game called Spell Connect for Kids, which is currently available on Apple App iStore. We also develop mobile applications. So let's get started. Uh, Physics. What is physics? Is defined as a branch of science concerned with the nature and properties of matter and energy. The matter of physics includes mechanics, heat, light, and other radiation, sound, electricity, magnetism, and the structure of atoms. So let's break it down. But what mean and how it relates to the game world. So in game world, objects behave with one another in the world itself. That is nature and properties of matter and energy. Then the objects keep moving. That is mechanics. There are lights, shadows, and day and night is there, which all can be done by physics of light. Sound is there, echo and distance from source. So like Doppler effect. When you're closer to something, it sounds louder. When you're farther, it sounds lighter. Then there even effects, flare and smoke effects can be replicated using equations of physics, which are made use in the games. So how would we define physics in games? I generally define physics of games as any object in a game that which interacts with the world or the other objects in the world in a uniform way, uh, such that it involves a law of interactions. This law of behavior and interaction can be defined as physics in games. So the question arises, why do we need physics? Physics is generally needed to enhance the human experience, to make simulated games appear more natural and uniform. You need to make sense of the physically realistic motions for some type of games like sports games, where it is quite critical, especially when you kick a ball or in the game, it should appear or reach the place at time, or when you're playing a game of cricket online, you should it should the motion should be as you intended it to be, or else the gameplay experience won't make sense. Also, it provides a richer gaming experience. It is quite essential that physics in games makes you help make a sense of everything what is happening, and you are able to relate with it. So what is physics engine? A physics engine is a engine which makes the physics happen. We need rules that will govern each other interactions and movements in the game. Physics ensures all the behavior and interaction that happen anywhere in the game world behaves consistently and uniformly. So basically, an engine is something which will tell the program that when an object falls, it will fall with a uniform way, or when an object collides with another object, the reaction would be in a uniform way. So a physics engine ensures this happens, and there are popular game engines over the years like Havoc, Physics, Box 2D, and there are more upcoming engines which are available. Even Unity and Unreal game engines also available. So, what is game physics? Generally, physics in games is related to real world or Newtonian physics. By Newtonian physics is the physics which we see around us, where objects are moving uniformly, where there are force equations, where there are various type of realistic things for example, when you throw a ball, it goes in a uniform way, or in an Angry Birds, the object goes in a projectile way. These are all related to Newtonian physics. Most games use basics of physics, or use those equations to extrapolate them in such a way that the game becomes playable. Some games, especially physics, as I mentioned earlier, sports games, try to simulate laws in exactly as the real world physics. And some games, like especially car games and all, are able to use the drag equations of frictions to make it much more realistic. However, there are some games where physics is entirely different from the real world physics. There are some places where it is exactly against the for example, you can have a world on moon, or where the gravity and everything is completely different. This is where you're it's a world where the physics is not at all related to the current world. So in this part of the lecture, we'll focus on some real world physics in games, where we'll talk about the position and movements, simple physics which are applied, which how they are applied in games. So we'll talk about gravity and friction. How does gravity impact the gameplay, and how can it be replicated in the game world? We'll also talk about projectile movements, as in Angry Birds, how it moves when an object is thrown at an angle, how it impacts. This all will be covered in the following slides. Okay, so first we'll talk about position and movements. Each and every object in the game world, to make it moves. So there's some moves with constant speed, some with user input, but however the movement for each second or each millisecond is constant or uniform. There can be a constant speed, or it can be an accelerated motion, where the objects are keeping increasing speed with time, like in Subway Surfer or Temple Run, where the player is the increases with speed, increases with time, and your reaction also improve needs to change. So how do you replicate this motion in the game world? It is quite essential that we understand basic physics to be able to apply those physics in the game world. So with some of you might have a background in physics, others who don't have. There's a formula in physics where distance is equal to velocity into time. What is velocities? Velocity is anything which has speed and direction. Anything which is moving in a direction, any direction with a constant speed, is called velocity. And a distance is velocity into time, as mentioned. In this thing, we are going to talk about uniform velocity, where speed and where the object will be at after time t. In game world, it is quite essential we are able to break it down in terms of pixels, so that your game engine or your render engine will be able to replicate that on the screen. So as we discussed, motion is a uniform motion is s is equal to ut, or distance is equal to velocity into time. And in physics, we need to have it both in x and y axis, because in terms of in the game screen, there are x coordinate and the y coordinate. So let a object moving with x velocity v will have a velocity component in x direction and a velocity component in y direction. So a position of the object would be after time t would be t into x velocity plus initial x, and t into y velocity plus y initial, which is the initial position of the object. And y is the y initial position. Suppose let's assume that the object is moving just in a straight line, such that it is moving from x is moving in a x direction only, or a straight line from left to right. In that case, one thing will realize that the velocity in the y direction, or the vertical direction, will be 0, and so the vertical position won't change. However, the position of in the horizontal direction will change, and that is the x, that will be the x velocity into time t. And after 1 second, what will be the position would be initial value plus the velocity. So let's assume an object is moving at 10 pixels per second. So after 1 second, the object would be at, and initially, let's assume initially it is at 10th pixel. After 1 second, it would be at 20 pixel. But however, the y direction won't change. So an animation or an object would appear that the object has moved from 10th pixel to the 20th pixel in a horizontal direction. And that is how we replicated the application of a simple uniform movement of an object. This can be applied at many places, like an enemy approaching in a Mario game, where it's moving at a consistent uniform speed towards you. Now we move on to uniform accelerated motion. Like in a racing game, with time your speed increases. Your speed increases. So we have accelerated movement. Here we are assuming uniform acceleration over a time period t. So using as basic equations of physics, we have distance equal to speed multiplied by time plus half into acceleration into time square. So this is a basic equation in physics. Further, velocity at that end position would, at after time t, would be initial velocity plus acceleration into time. However, in game world, we need to determine the position in terms of pixels. Again, so we use the above equations, both equations in both x and y axis, to determine the 2D movements of an object. Similar, like in previous, we have the x after time t, the position would be velocity into time plus acceleration in the x direction into time square divided by 2 plus x initial. And similar things for y. Also, the velocity would be x velocity plus acceleration into time, and same for y also. This may be a bit confusing, but an example will help. Let's say after 1 second, an object is moving in a straight line. Let's say you're driving, a car is driving with a constant speed with an accelerated motion. So after time t, and starting at 10th pixel in a horizontal direction, such that there is no vertical direction, in the sense it is just moving in a straight line, the object would appear to move from initial x at an accelerated motion, and this would be determined by initial point plus ut, that is velocity in after 1 second. So let's say that if the velocity is 10, it would become 10 plus acceleration ax square by 2. So ax by 2, sorry, because t is 1, so ax by 2, and y initial would be the same as we decided. So it would be, let's say the initial position is 10, and it is initial velocity is again 5, so it would become 10 plus 5 plus, let's say acceleration is 5, that will be 5 by 2. So 10 plus 5 by 2, that would be 17.5. So the which will be rounded up to 18, since we need a integral value. So the x position after time 1 second would be going to 18. So this is what is essential in the accelerated motion. So we can show it is increasing, speed is increasing with time. Similarly, velocity at the end after 10 seconds, 10 would be, after 1 second would be initial velocity plus acceleration. Like we talked about acceleration in the right, acceleration in horizontal direction, there is also acceleration in vertical direction. If we negate the acceleration in horizontal direction and the negative, and consider the real world Newtonian physics where gravity is applicable, then we have a uniform accelerated motion in vertical direction. This value is popularly 9.8 meters per second square. However, it is used as 10 meters per second square, which is to have an integral values as we need it in terms of pixels. Here we use a of x equal to 0 and a of y acceleration of x, because we are not assuming that we are assuming there is no acceleration in the horizontal direction, just vertical direction, which is the gravity. So that would be 10. So when you are dropping a ball from a height, any height, it only force that will be applicable with the will be the gravitational pull, and the acceleration would be 10. So once after 1 second, a falling object would would stay in the same horizontal position. Horizontally, it would be at the same pixel. However, the vertically it would have moved from initial position plus the velocity at which it was thrown plus 10 by 2, that is 5. That is gravity by 2. So an object which is and if the object is just dropped and not thrown, then the velocity y velocity would be 0, and you would have the new position would be initial position plus 5. So after every seconds, the pixel would move at a speed of 5. The new velocity at, again, horizontal, we are not horizontal, the velocity will be same as initial, which is 0, because in horizontal direction there is no movement. In vertical direction there is a constant movement, and it would be velocity would be y underscore velocity plus 10, which will be the initial velocity plus 10. And again, if velocity is 0, it will stay 10 after 1 second. So we talked about horizontal accelerated motion, we talked about vertical accelerated motion, we talked about horizontal uniform motion, vertical uniform motion. Many of you are used to the many of you might have seen Angry Birds, and this is where there is a projectile motion such that there is a horizontal uniform motion in the vertical direction, and a gravitational force which is applicable throughout the motion of the object, which is in the vertical direction. So this object will be moving at a constant horizontal speed, and a vertical acceleration will be applicable through it, which will pull the object down, and this would form a parabolic motion, which will come along the way. So the height, as you might have observed when playing Angry Birds, the steeper you throw, it goes at a shorter distance, and if you are throwing it more at a 30-degree angle or a 45-degree angle, it will go farther. So it depends on where you want to hit, that you adjust the angle. So angle is quite critical during projectile motions. So as besides stones and ball, or any game ball or football or anything, we also have bullets, which are a type of projectile motion, uh, which determines the range of the bullets as well as the speed at the end of the bullet when it is thrown, or a rocket when it is fired. The motion and everything is determined by projectile motion. So if the object is thrown at an angle A and velocity v, then initial v would be a component of velocity in the x direction, which is generally determined by the cosine of that angle, which is v cos A, where v is the velocity at which it was thrown, and initial velocity y would be in the y direction would be sine a. As we talked about, it is uniform motion in the x direction, so there won't be any acceleration, and so hence it would be zero. And it is it is 10 meters per second as gravity, as we talked about, which is completely applicable during this motion. Please note that we are not considering wind reaction at the moment. So in the previous equations we talked about s is equal to ut plus half at square, and s is v is equal to u plus at. We'll apply those equations here. So what would be the x at after time t? What would be the cosine of velocity into time plus initial value? Okay, since there is no acceleration. Further, again, since the velocity of y would position of y after time t would be sine a, the component of velocity in the y direction, into time multiplied by plus acceleration 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 divided by 2 plus, okay, okay, sorry about that. So velocity would be cosine a, because it's not, there's no motion in the x direction, and velocity would be sine a into velocity of y would be sine a into 10 t. So this might you might have questions regarding how this works in real application. So if you have any particular example which you would like to discuss, you can ask in the questions. I'll be taking a break. I was just stopping for questions for 1 minute, so you have enough time to talk. So I'll just summarize what we have covered till now. We are applying the basic equations of motion and movements to determine straight line movement, accelerated movement, throwing a ball, dropping a ball, projectile motions, all these type of things which are common in many games and are observed in a wide range of games. These all have been reflected in the equations which we applied by basic application of two equations: s is equal to ut plus half at square and v is equal to u plus at. We are able to determine a wide range of movements and motions in this throughout the which is quite applicable in generalized gameplay. So I'll be talking a bit more about projectile. Just a brief uh, with physics, without going into much detail. What we can understand is that we can determine a trajectory of the projectile, where the project where the object will be at time t. So it can be at the topmost point, or it can be at some random position, but it will always be in a parabola. And this, and since it is in a form of a y equal to a x plus bx square. So for any value of x, you can determine the value of y and vice versa. This can help you determine the distance travel before hitting the ground. So when y becomes 0, such that it comes back to start position, x would have some value, and that would be the distance traveled in a horizontal direction. You can also find out the height, such that when x becomes 0, what is the value of y? Sorry. When it reaches the topmost point, such that the velocity of vertical velocity becomes 0, then that time you can find out the height, and similarly the time taken to hit the ground again. Those all things can be determined by using basic equations which we talked about. As I mentioned previously, we are not considering wind reaction resistance, but this can also be applied uh, and such that the horizontal motion can also have a negative uh, speed reaction, accelerated motion. So it would instead of the uniform motion in the horizontal direction where acceleration was 0, acceleration in the x direction was 0, we will be adding a component for wind resistance. Again, this is currently we are talking about uniform. We can also have dynamic, so it can increase with time, such that the acceleration with time increases or velocity with time changes. And using a combination of mathematics and physics, we can derive for every instant the each and every position can be determined. However, it is quite essential to minimize the calculations so that it's a smooth game is smooth to run. So, as I said, we are summarizing the movement with basic application of realistic physics. We are able to move an object in space. We are able to throw a ball and see where it lands. So when you're playing a baseball or a cricket shot, the speed at which it was hit would determine where the ball lands, whether it's over the ropes or ahead of the ropes. Or when you're kicking a ball in football, does it reach the player or does it bounce and reach? So these all are application of realistic movements, speed related motion physics which we are applying to determine this range. We can use a combination of these, like an arrow which can be a projectile motion, and a bird which is flying in the air at a uniform speed. So what will happen when I shoot an arrow and the bird is moving, and such that my at what point both of these trajectories match such that my arrow hits the bird. This is what will be applicable. This can be applied. So now we are using combination of two movements, two equations, and this is where the physics application is there. And there will also be an application of collision out here, so that when the arrow and the bird interact with one another, there is a collision out there, and this is what we are going to determine. We can determine in physics of games. There are wide range of applications, and if you can think of any application you would like to discuss, you can ask any questions. As I talked about, we can also apply physics for force and law and equation. So when you're hitting a golf ball, the speed at which or the motion at which you hit, the farther it lands. There's wind resistance out there, and this all can be determined by using laws of equations of forces and friction. Even friction is applicable when you're driving a car, and when you apply brakes, there's friction out there, a frictional force, and how long will it take to stop. This is all an application of force equations. And we also have the impact. So suppose you are hitting your shot, hitting a shot, and what type of acceleration comes in? That is gravity. Then, as I discussed, collision is there. There is a big branch of game physics which revolves around collision. There is rigid body collisions. So many people might ask, what is rigid body collision? Generally, let's assume you have a aeroplane which is flying. It is very difficult to map each and every pixel and calculate whether another object is colliding with each and every pixel in the of the aeroplane, which is very heavy for calculation. So what we do is, generally we box the aeroplane in a simple circle or a simple rectangular box, such that if anything comes in that box, we'll determine it as a collision. It's the approximation of an aeroplane as a box or a circle, depending on the object. So we reduce soft body collision and increase rigid body collision, because these are much more uh, in a much more optimized way of using a game, so that the game speed is quite good. Similarly, we have particles. You might have observed smokes, flares, how they are, how they behave in the game, and the application of physics equations are there for each and every particle. So how, what will be the trajectory of that each particle, or how the smoke moves in the wind. So there are certain games. Sorry about that. So splatters and explosions, even a exploding oil tank or something has has a motion, has a movement which makes it appear realistic, and all these realistics are applied using physics. There are some physical engines which already do that, but some which you have to program so that it appears realistic. A in simple game like Angry Birds, where the boxes explode, they behave in a certain way of, there's a equation behind how the reaction is there. Even magnetic and gravitational equations can be applied, where uh, if some of you might know about physics, you might realize there's some where the closer you go, or the attraction forces, closer you go, the attraction forces in the magnet increases, and or there's a repulsive forces also. So it depends, and this all can be used, applied in physics world. One thing we have to say is that physics in these games is not, is just uh, we use in games. We just use physics as as a reference, and not as a exact replication. Because an exact replication may not be an enjoyable or a playable game. You need to modify the equation. So at times you might have to reduce the gravitational force or increase the gravitational force to make it more playable. So instead of 10, you use 15 as a gravity, or 5 as a gravity, so that the object falls at a slower speed. So basically, you're using Newtonian physics as a reference and not as an accurate representation, unless you are making an accurate representative game. So also, as I said, we have to reduce the calculations by the engine, because we cannot have detailed equations where the engine takes ever forever to just calculate those each and every movement. Reduce the movement either by replacing it with constants, or modifying the equation such that there's minimum calculations required. There are many people who ask whether I can create my own game engine. Yes, of course you can create, as long as one thing, as long as you ensure that there is a consistent with your theme of the game world, and it behaves consistently overall in the game world, you can create your own physics. you can have an horizontal gravity, or you can have a variable gravity field. Anything can is possible as long as it's consistent throughout the game. Basically, once you define the behavior and interaction, the rules in your world, you have created a basic game engine, and this is what all about physics in games is all about. You have to create your own game engine such that all the laws and interactions are replicated. So if you have any questions, you can ask.
Writing the process and then there's a file. हाँ, step by step क्या क्या किया उसने, just और ये अपना plan है
What should we add? Yeah.
Vikram.
We have a question from Mr. Vikram. He asked whether we can create a hands-on session in small games. Sure, we can arrange for that. Also, if you would like to know more about game making, you can either contact on at aniket@samyakinteractive.com or sagar at schoolofmediadesign.com or call us at 99235 60637, and we can have a one-on-one discussion whether through Skype or through phone call, and if you have any difficulties we can also arrange for sort it out. So
Any more questions?
any more questions?
Yeah, hi, this is Sagar here from Anibrain School of Media Design. We are soon launching a course on game design and development in the month of May. So, if anyone interested, you can drop at our school. It's at Viman Nagar, Pune. So in case any queries, you can drop me a mail as well at sagar@schoolofmediadesign.com, or you can call me at 9923560637. I repeat, it's 9923560637.